Oaklynn Monroe tightened her grip on the car keys as she knocked on the Parkers' front door, the late summer heat pressing against her skin. Babysitting for the Parkers was supposed to be a simple gig: watch their 6-year-old son, Jonah, for a few hours, make sure he was fed, entertained, and in bed by 8. Easy money. She didn't expect to feel a set of eyes on her the second she stepped onto the porch. Across the street, a man leaned against the sleek black car parked in his driveway, his gaze fixed on her. He was tall, effortlessly confident, and dressed in a crisp white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and the sharp cut of his jaw made it impossible not to stare for a second too long. The front door swung open before she could think too much about it. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Oaklynn." Mrs. Parker looked flustered, already halfway to her car. "Jonah's in the living room. Dinner's in the fridge. We'll be back around 11. "No problem," Oaklynn said with a small smile. As soon as the door shut behind her, Jonah came running into the foyer. "Oaklynn." He launched himself into her arms, his curly brown hair bouncing. "Hey, buddy. What do you want to do tonight?" "Movie night." He grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. Settling onto the couch, Oaklynn put on his favorite animated movie. Jonah snuggled up beside her, his small fingers digging into the bowl of popcorn she'd made. It was only when she glanced out the window that she realized the man across the street hadn't moved. Who was he? Tristan Pierce had seen the Parkers' new babysitter before. She always arrived on time, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt. There was something effortlessly warm about her, something that made her stand out in this neighborhood full of polished, high-society women. He wasn't sure why he was so intrigued. Maybe it was the way she laughed when Jonah told her a terrible knock-knock joke. Maybe it was the way she always seemed genuinely invested in whatever the kid was saying. Or maybe it was because she had no idea who he was. In a town where everyone whispered about his wealth, where people treated him differently the second they learned his last name, Oaklynn Monroe was refreshingly unaware. And for the first time in years, Tristan found himself wanting to keep it that way. "Jonah, get back here," Oaklynn called, half laughing, half exasperated as the little boy ran across the Parkers' front lawn, his arms stretched out like an airplane. "I'm flying," he shouted. Oaklynn jogged after him, but before she could grab him, Jonah collided straight into someone. A deep chuckle rumbled in the air as strong hands steadied the boy. "Whoa, buddy. You okay?" Oaklynn's breath hitched. It was him. The man from across the street. Jonah blinked up at him, wide-eyed. "You're really tall." The man laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." He glanced at Oaklynn, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "I don't think we've officially met." "Tristan." Oaklynn wiped her palms against her jeans before shaking his hand. "Oaklynn, I babysit Jonah." Tristan's grip was warm, firm, but he let go too quickly. "I've seen you around," he admitted. "You're good with him." She felt an unexpected warmth creep up her neck. "Thanks. He's a great kid." Jonah tugged on her arm. "Can we get ice cream?" Oaklynn hesitated. "I don't know if your parents would be okay with that." Tristan pulled out his phone. "I know them. I'll text them and ask." Oaklynn raised an eyebrow. "You know the Parkers?" "I live next door," he said simply. "We go way back." Jonah practically vibrated with excitement. "Can we go, Oaklynn? Please?" She sighed, already knowing she was going to give in. "Fine. But only one scoop." Tristan grinned. "I'll drive." The ice cream shop was buzzing with people, the scent of sugar and waffle cones filling the air. Jonah eagerly picked out his flavor while Oaklynn stood beside Tristan, suddenly hyper-aware of how close he was. "You babysit full-time?" he asked, handing her a cup of chocolate ice cream. She shook her head. "Just as a side job. I'm finishing my degree." "What are you studying?" "Education. I want to be a teacher." Something shifted in his expression, something that looked a lot like respect. "That's a tough job." She shrugged. "Yeah, but it's worth it." Jonah was too busy devouring his ice cream to notice the way Tristan watched her. Like he was seeing something rare. Something different. "So," she said, licking her spoon. "What do you do?" Tristan hesitated. It was such a simple question, but one he rarely answered honestly. "I run a business," he said vaguely. Oaklynn smirked. "That's the most non-answer I've ever heard." He chuckled. "I own a company. Real estate." She nodded, satisfied. "Sounds important." He tilted his head. "You don't know who I am, do you?" She frowned. "Should I?" For a second, Tristan just stared at her. Then he smiled genuinely, like he hadn't in a long time. "No," he said softly. "You really shouldn't." And for some reason, that made him like her even more. Oaklynn watched as Jonah eagerly finished his ice cream, the sticky remnants smearing across his chin. Tristan handed him a napkin before she could, effortlessly slipping into the role of someone who knew how to handle a kid. It caught her off guard. Most men like him, polished and confident, didn't usually have the patience for 6-year-olds. "You've got some experience with kids?" she asked, genuinely curious. Tristan leaned back slightly, his gaze settling on Jonah, who was now preoccupied with his melting treat. "Not exactly. But I've had to take care of people before." There was something in the way he said it, gruff, almost reluctant, that made her pause. But before she could press, Jonah tugged on her sleeve. "Can we go to the park next? Please?" Oaklynn glanced at the time. "It's getting late, buddy." Tristan, however, seemed amused. "Just for a little bit?" Jonah's face lit up, and Oaklynn sighed in defeat. "Fine, but only for a little while." They walked toward the park, the soft glow of streetlights casting shadows along the sidewalk. Jonah ran ahead, his laughter echoing through the quiet evening. Tristan walked at Oaklynn's side, his hands tucked into his pockets, his presence somehow both effortless and commanding. "You're good with him," she admitted. He glanced at her. "And you're surprised by that?" "A little," she teased. "You don't seem like the type who spends his evenings chasing after 6-year-olds. His lips twitched. "I don't usually." "So what do you do when you're not, running a company?" For a moment, he hesitated, as if no one had ever asked him that before. "Work keeps me busy." "That's not an answer." He exhaled, glancing up at the darkening sky. "I travel. I like restoring old cars when I have the time. And I box." She blinked. "Boxing?" He nodded. "It clears my head." It was unexpected, but somehow it fit. There was an edge to him, something controlled and restrained, like a man who needed an outlet for all the things he wasn't saying. Jonah's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Tristan, push me on the swings." Tristan gave her a pointed look. "Guess I have a new job now." She laughed. "Better get to work." He strode toward Jonah, effortlessly lifting him onto the swing before giving him a solid push. Watching them together, Oaklynn felt something she hadn't expected, an unfamiliar warmth curling in her chest. She shook it off. This wasn't anything. Just a neighbor being kind, right? A few nights later, Oaklynn arrived at the Parker house as usual, expecting nothing more than an easy night of babysitting. But as soon as she stepped inside, Jonah ran up to her, practically bouncing with excitement. "Guess what?" he said, his eyes wide. "What?" "Tristan invited us over for dinner." She blinked. "He what?" Mrs. Parker entered the foyer, slipping on her earrings. "I hope you don't mind. Tristan mentioned he was grilling tonight and thought Jonah would enjoy it. He insisted you come too." "Oh," Oaklynn said, caught off guard. "I mean, if you're okay with it." Mrs. Parker smiled. "Of course. He's family to us." That piece of information made Oaklynn pause. Family? That explained why he was always around, but it didn't explain why he'd invited her. Still, she didn't have much choice now. A few minutes later, she and Jonah walked across the street, where Tristan's house loomed larger up close, a modern masterpiece of glass and stone, sleek yet inviting. Jonah rang the doorbell with uncontained excitement. Tristan opened the door, dressed casually in a fitted t-shirt and dark jeans. "Right on time," he said, stepping aside. Oaklynn followed Jonah inside, her eyes sweeping over the interior. The house was stunning, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and decor that managed to be both luxurious and lived in. "You live here alone?" she asked, unable to help herself. Tristan nodded. "Most of the time." Jonah had already made himself at home, peering curiously into the kitchen. "What are we eating?" Tristan ruffled his hair. "Burgers. Hope that works for you." Jonah cheered. "Yes." Oaklynn folded her arms, watching Tristan move around the kitchen with practiced ease. "You cook?" He glanced at her. "I can handle a grill. That's more than most men can say." He smirked. "No," smiled. "I like to be self-sufficient." They ended up on the back patio, Jonah chattering happily between bites of his burger while Tristan listened with genuine interest. Somewhere between the easy conversation and the way Tristan's eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, Oaklynn realized something unsettling. She liked being around him. And that was dangerous. Because men like Tristan Pierce, wealthy, successful, and undeniably magnetic, weren't the kind who stuck around. And she wasn't the kind of woman who got caught up in things that could break her heart. She needed to remember that. Oaklynn had every intention of keeping things simple. Babysit Jonah, collect her paycheck, and go home. Tristan Pierce was a complication she didn't need. Yet, somehow, she kept finding herself tangled in moments with him, small, unexpected interactions that made it impossible to ignore the pull between them. Like tonight. She was helping Jonah with his bedtime routine, making sure his teeth were brushed and his pajamas were on when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Parker had already texted to say they'd be late, so Oaklynn wasn't expecting anyone. Jonah bolted toward the front door with the kind of uncontained energy only a 6-year-old possessed. "I'll get it." Before she could stop him, he swung the door open. Tristan stood on the porch, one hand resting casually against the doorframe. Oaklynn's pulse did something ridiculous. "What are you doing here?" Jonah beamed. "Tristan, come in." Tristan glanced at Oaklynn as if waiting for her approval. She let out a reluctant breath. "Fine. But if he gets too hyper before bed, I'm blaming you." Tristan chuckled and stepped inside. "Fair enough." Jonah grabbed his hand immediately. "We were just about to read a bedtime story. You can read it with us." Oaklynn started to protest, but Tristan had already let the kid drag him into the living room. "All right. Which one are we reading?" Jonah rummaged through his bookshelf before selecting a book about a mischievous raccoon. He plopped down between them on the couch, flipping to the first page. Oaklynn expected Tristan to be indifferent, maybe even a little bored, but he surprised her. He read with enthusiasm, changing his voice for different characters, making Jonah laugh so hard he nearly fell off the couch. Something about the scene, the warmth of it, the way Tristan so effortlessly fit in made Oaklynn's chest tighten. She wasn't supposed to feel like this. When the story ended, Jonah yawned and leaned against her, his eyelids drooping. Oaklynn smoothed a hand over his hair. "Time for bed, buddy." Jonah mumbled something incoherent and trudged upstairs. Once he was gone, Oaklynn turned to Tristan. "You didn't have to do that." He leaned back against the couch, watching her. "I wanted to." She exhaled, suddenly too aware of how close they were. "Why are you really here?" Tristan didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, quietly, "I like spending time with you." Her stomach flipped. "Tristan, I know what you're going to say," he interrupted. "That this is complicated. That we come from different worlds. But I don't care." She swallowed hard. "You should." "Why?" "Because guys like you don't go for girls like me." His jaw tightened. "You think I'm some entitled rich guy who only dates socialites?" She met his gaze. "Aren't you?" "No," he said simply. "I'm a man who knows what he wants. And right now, that's you." Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She needed to end this before it spiraled into something she couldn't control. "I should check on Jonah," she said, standing abruptly. Tristan didn't stop her. He didn't push. But as she walked away, she felt his eyes on her, heavy with something she wasn't ready to name. The next day, Oaklynn tried to shake off the lingering weight of last night's conversation. She focused on her classes, on work, on anything but Tristan Pierce. But life had other plans. She was walking out of a coffee shop, balancing a cup in each hand when a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down and there he was, looking effortlessly composed. "You always this busy?" Tristan asked, nodding toward the textbooks tucked under her arm. She sighed. "Some of us have to work for a living." He arched a brow. "You think I don't?" "You run a business," she said. "You don't have to worry about paying rent or affording tuition." He considered her for a moment before gesturing to the passenger seat. "Get in." Oaklynn hesitated. "Why?" "I want to show you something." She should say no. She should walk away. But curiosity won. With a reluctant sigh, she climbed into the car. Tristan drove in silence for a few minutes before pulling up to a large building in the heart of the city. He parked and gestured for her to follow him inside. They stepped into a grand lobby, the polished floors gleaming under the soft lighting. Employees greeted Tristan with a mixture of respect and admiration. He led her toward an elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. "What is this place?" she asked. "My company's headquarters," he said. The doors opened to reveal a sleek office, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Oaklynn turned to him, confused. "Why are we here?" Tristan leaned against his desk, watching her carefully. Because I want you to understand something. She folded her arms. And what's that? He exhaled. I built this. She blinked. What? I wasn't born into money, Oaklynn, he said. I didn't have a trust fund or a family name to fall back on. I worked for every single thing I have. She stared at him, stunned. But my parents were barely around, he continued. I had to figure things out on my own. I started small, flipping houses, investing in real estate. It took years before I got here. Oaklynn's throat tightened. She'd assumed so much about him, about his life. Tristan stepped closer. I get it. You think we come from different worlds. And maybe we do. But don't assume you know who I am. She swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to stop pushing me away, he said softly. The air between them felt charged, like something was on the verge of breaking. Oaklynn's pulse raced. Tristan, Before she could finish, the office door swung open. A tall, impeccably dressed woman strode in, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She barely spared Oaklynn a glance before turning to Tristan. There you are, the woman said smoothly. We have a meeting. Tristan's jaw clenched. Not now, Vanessa. Vanessa's eyes flicked between them, sharp with curiosity. Am I interrupting something? Oaklynn took a step back, suddenly feeling out of place. Tristan turned to her, his expression unreadable. Oaklynn. But she was already moving toward the door. Thanks for the ride, she murmured. Then she walked away, ignoring the ache in her chest. Oaklynn sat on the bus ride home, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. Her heart was still racing, the encounter in Tristan's office replaying in her head. The way he had looked at her earnest, unwavering, had shaken something deep inside her. And then Vanessa had walked in. That woman had belonged in his world. Confident, poised, dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than Oaklynn's entire tuition. It had been a stark reminder of the divide between them, of the life Tristan lived. She wasn't part of it. She spent the next few days avoiding him. No walks to the ice cream shop, no surprise dinners, no lingering conversations. She kept things strictly about Jonah, making sure the little boy never noticed anything was different. But Tristan noticed. She felt his eyes on her every time she stepped onto the Parkers' porch. She caught glimpses of him watching from across the street, his expression unreadable. He was giving her space. Maybe that should have made things easier. It didn't. Late one evening, after putting Jonah to bed, Oaklynn stepped outside for some air. The street was quiet, the glow of street lamps casting long shadows. She wrapped her arms around herself, willing the ache in her chest to fade. A deep voice broke the silence. You're avoiding me. She turned sharply. Tristan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his gaze steady. She hadn't even heard him approach. I've just been busy, she said, keeping her voice even. He didn't buy it. You ran out of my office. She let out a slow breath. I didn't belong there. Tristan took a step closer. Who told you that? She shook her head. No one had to. His jaw tensed. Because of Vanessa? Because of everything, she said, exasperated. Look around, Tristan. You live in a world of million-dollar deals and penthouses. I live in a world of late-night study sessions and counting every dollar in my bank account. You don't see the difference? I see it, he admitted. I just don't care. Her breath caught. I grew up with nothing, he continued, voice quieter now. I worked for every single thing I have. And none of it means anything if I can't choose who I want to be with. Her heart pounded. And you think that's me? Tristan stepped even closer, his presence warm despite the night chill. I know it is. She swallowed. You don't even know me. His lips curved slightly, not in amusement, but in something softer. I know that you tuck Jonah in at night even when you don't have to. I know you always carry a book in your bag. And you get lost in it when you think no one's watching. I know you hum under your breath when you cook. And you never take the last slice of pizza even when you want it. Her breath hitched. And I know, he added, voice low, that every time you look at me you feel this. Just as much as I do. She hated that he was right. That she wanted him. That she had been wanting him from the moment he had first looked at her, like she was something worth knowing. But wanting him didn't change reality. Tristan, this doesn't make sense? She whispered, as if saying it quietly would make it hurt less. Then make it make sense, he countered. Tell me what you need. She closed her eyes for a second, gathering the courage she wasn't sure she had. I need to feel like I won't get lost in your world. Tristan was silent for a long moment. Then, gently, then let me show you that you won't. She wanted to fight it, wanted to keep pushing him away. but she was too tired of running. So this time, when he reached for her hand, she let him. And everything shifted. Tristan didn't waste time. The next day, he showed up at the Parkers' house just as Oaklynn was finishing up dinner with Jonah. She opened the door, surprised to see him standing there, holding 2 helmets. "What are those for?" she asked warily. His lips twitched. "You trust me?" She hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. That was all he needed. An hour later, she found herself gripping tightly onto Tristan's waist as his motorcycle cut through the evening air, the wind rushing past them. He had insisted on taking her somewhere she'd never been. When they finally arrived, she let out a breath, stepping off the bike. They were on a hill overlooking the entire city, the skyline stretching endlessly below them. The stars were bright, the night quiet except for the distant hum of the city beneath them. Oaklynn stared in awe. "I never knew this place existed." Tristan took off his helmet, setting it aside. "I used to come here when I needed to clear my head." She looked at him. "And you brought me here because—" He exhaled, looking out at the view. "Because I wanted you to see that my world isn't just boardrooms and expensive suits. It's this. It's moments like these." Oaklynn felt something inside her unravel. She had spent so much time assuming she would never fit into his world. But maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about what his world even was. She turned to him, her pulse thrumming. "Tristan." He faced her fully, his expression unreadable. And then he took a step closer. And another. Until there was nothing between them but the space of a breath. Her heart pounded as he reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Tell me this isn't real," he murmured. "And I'll walk away." She opened her mouth. Closed it. Because she couldn't say it. Because it was real. So instead of answering, she did the only thing that made sense. She reached for him first. And when his lips met hers, every single doubt faded into nothing. Because this was undeniable. The city stretched beneath them, a sea of twinkling lights, but Oaklynn barely noticed. Her heart was still racing from the kiss, her breath uneven. Tristan stood close, his fingers still lightly resting against her waist as if he wasn't ready to let go. Neither was she. But reality pressed in, the weight of everything left unsaid settling between them. She stepped back, needing space to think. Tristan let her, though his gaze never wavered. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted, her voice quieter than she intended. He studied her, his expression unreadable. "Neither do I." That surprised her. Tristan Pierce, the man who always seemed so sure of everything, didn't have an answer. "But I know one thing," he continued, stepping closer again. "I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." Neither did she. But wanting something and knowing how to make it work were 2 different things. She let out a slow breath. "I need time." His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but then he nodded. "I can give you that." Relief in something else, something she wasn't ready to name, settled in her chest. The ride home was quieter, more charged. When Tristan pulled up in front of the Parkers' house, he turned to her, waiting. Oaklynn hesitated, then reached for his hand, squeezing it once before letting go. "Good night, Tristan." His fingers curled like he wanted to hold on, but he let her go. "Good night, Oaklynn." She walked inside, closing the door behind her, and leaned against it for a long moment. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure what scared her more, falling for him or the possibility that she already had. The next few days were a blur of routine, but everything felt different. Tristan didn't push, didn't demand answers. He simply existed in the spaces around her. A quiet presence that she couldn't ignore. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Their hands brushed when he helped Jonah with something. Every moment between them was charged, filled with something unspoken. It was terrifying and exhilarating. One evening, as she was tidying up after Jonah had fallen asleep, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Tristan standing there, holding a small plate covered in foil. She arched a brow. "What's this?" He handed it to her. "Dinner. You forgot to eat earlier." Warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't even realized he'd noticed. She pulled back the foil to reveal a perfectly cooked steak with roasted potatoes and vegetables. It smelled incredible. "You cooked this?" she asked, surprised. His lips twitched. "You sound skeptical." "I just didn't take you for the type." He leaned against the doorframe. "I told you I like to be self-sufficient." Oaklynn suddenly felt very aware of how close he was, the way the space between them seemed to shrink without either of them moving. She cleared her throat. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said simply. Something about the way he said it, so matter-of-fact, made her pulse stutter. She stepped aside. Do you want to come in? Tristan hesitated for half a second before nodding. They ended up in the kitchen, Oaklynn sitting on the counter while Tristan leaned against the island watching as she took her first bite. She groaned. Okay, that's unfair. How are you good at everything? His eyes darkened slightly at her reaction, but he only said, I have my weaknesses. She tilted her head. Like? His gaze held hers. You. Her stomach flipped. She set her fork down carefully. Tristan. I know, he said, his voice softer now. You need time. I'm trying to respect that. She swallowed. But I'm not a patient man, Oaklynn. His voice turned rougher, more honest. And every time I'm around you, I want to break my own rules. The air between them grew heavier. She could push him away again. Could tell him the same things she'd been telling herself, that this was impossible, that it would never work. But instead, she reached for his hand. Maybe, she said slowly, we don't need to have it all figured out right now. Tristan's fingers tightened around hers. That sounds dangerously like hope. She smiled, small but real. Maybe it is. For the first time in weeks, she let herself stop fighting it. And it felt a lot like falling. The change between them wasn't sudden, but it was undeniable. Tristan became part of her world in ways she hadn't expected. He showed up at the Parkers' house more often, always finding an excuse to linger. He helped Jonah build a model airplane, much to the little boy's delight. He brought Oaklynn coffee without asking how she took it because he already knew. And she found herself letting him in. She told him about her childhood, about growing up with a single mother who worked too hard for too little. He told her about the first property he ever bought, how terrified he'd been that it would all fall apart. They weren't just two people circling around something unspoken anymore. They were something real. One evening, as they sat on the Parkers' back porch watching the sunset, Jonah ran up to them, excitement written all over his face. My school's having a family day next weekend, he announced. There's games and food and everything. Oaklynn smiled. That sounds fun. Jonah turned to Tristan. Will you come too? Tristan blinked, clearly caught off guard. He glanced at Oaklynn as if asking for permission. She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Tristan looked back at Jonah and smiled. Yeah, buddy. I'd love to. Jonah cheered and ran off, already planning which games they'd play. Oaklynn watched him go before turning to Tristan. You didn't have to say yes. I wanted to. She let out a soft laugh. You say that a lot. His eyes softened. Because it's true. And just like that, the last of her resistance crumbled. Because Tristan Pierce wasn't just a man with wealth and power. He was the man who showed up. For Jonah. For her. And maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to stop running from that. The morning of Jonah's school event arrived with an unexpected nervous energy settling in Oaklynn's chest. It was ridiculous, really. This wasn't a big deal. Just a weekend activity with Jonah. And Tristan. She wasn't sure when things had shifted so completely, when he had gone from being an impossible thought to someone she couldn't imagine her life without. But here they were. Jonah burst into the living room, already dressed in his favorite striped shirt, his excitement impossible to contain. Is Tristan coming? Oaklynn ruffled his hair. He said he would, didn't he? As if on cue, a knock sounded at the door. Jonah practically sprinted to open it, revealing Tristan standing there, effortlessly put together in a dark polo and jeans. He held a small paper bag in one hand and offered it to Oaklynn. You skipped breakfast. She took it, warmth spreading through her at the simple gesture. You really need to stop paying so much attention. Not likely. His gaze held hers for a second longer than necessary before Jonah pulled him inside. They arrived at the school grounds to find it bustling with families, kids running between game booths, parents chatting in clusters. Jonah immediately spotted his friends and ran off, leaving Oaklynn and Tristan standing together near the entrance. Tristan glanced around, taking in the chaos with an amused expression. I haven't been to something like this in years. She nudged him playfully. Nervous? He scoffed. I close multi-million-dollar deals for a living. I think I can handle a school fair. She arched a brow. We'll see about that. They spent the morning trailing after Jonah as he led them from booth to booth. Tristan surprised her by fully engaging, helping Jonah win a stuffed animal at the ring toss, attempting and failing to beat him at the potato sack race. Oaklynn found herself watching him more than she should, caught off guard by how effortlessly he fit into this world. At one point, as Jonah ran ahead to the next game, Tristan leaned in slightly. You keep staring. She rolled her eyes. You're imagining things. He studied her, his voice quieter now. Am I? The way he looked at her made her insides coil with something warm and dangerous. She swallowed, glancing away. You're good with him. He didn't answer right away. Then, I like him. She felt the weight behind those words, the unspoken truth that he wasn't just here for Jonah. He was here for her. Before she could respond, Jonah called them over to the face painting station, completely oblivious to the shift in the air between them. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and stolen glances. By the time the event wrapped up, Oaklynn was exhausted, but in the best way. As they walked back to the car, Jonah holding onto his new stuffed animal, Tristan slowed his pace beside her. "Can I take you somewhere?" She hesitated. "Where?" "You'll see." Her instinct should have been to refuse. But she didn't want to. She nodded. Jonah, already half asleep in the back seat, barely noticed when Tristan pulled up to a quiet street lined with townhouses. He parked in front of one and turned to Oaklynn. "This is my first house," he said simply. She frowned. "The first house you bought?" He shook his head. "The first place that ever felt like home." Curiosity stirred in her. "Why are we here?" He exhaled. "Because I want you to understand something. I didn't build my life to impress anyone. I built it because I knew what it was like to have nothing. To not know if I'd have a place to sleep. I've spent my whole life making sure I never feel that way again." Her chest ached at the raw honesty in his voice. He turned to face her fully. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm realizing that home isn't about what you own. It's about who you're with." Her breath caught. "I don't want to just fit into your world, Oaklynn," he said. "I want to build one with you." Tears pricked at her eyes. She had spent so long convincing herself they were too different that they couldn't work. But the truth was, he wasn't asking her to change. He was asking her to let him in. And she wanted to. So instead of answering, she reached for his hand. His fingers tightened around hers, and just like that, the last of her doubts faded. There was no more running. Not from him. Not from this. Months passed, and what had once felt impossible became effortless. Tristan and Oaklynn fell into something steady, something real. He was there when she needed him, supporting her through long nights of studying, surprising her with takeout when she forgot to eat. She was there for him in ways he hadn't even realized he needed, grounding him when the chaos of his business threatened to consume him. Jonah had fully embraced Tristan's presence in their lives, and Tristan, in return, had embraced the little boy as if he were his own. One evening, as they stood in her tiny apartment making dinner together, Tristan suddenly stilled. She looked up. "What?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "I had this whole elaborate plan," he admitted. "Something extravagant, probably involving a private island or a rooftop dinner." She laughed breathlessly. "That does sound like you." His expression softened. "But then I realized none of that matters. What matters is this. Us. Right here." Her eyes burned with emotion. He opened the box, revealing a ring that was both elegant and simple, timeless in a way that felt perfect. "Oaklynn Monroe," he said, voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I love you. And I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Marry me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word barely left her lips before he pulled her into his arms, kissing her like she was the only thing that had ever mattered. And in that moment, she knew she had found her home. Not in a place, but in him. A year later, under a sky filled with fairy lights and surrounded by the people they loved, Oaklynn walked down the aisle toward the man who had changed everything. Tristan stood waiting for her, his expression filled with something so deep, so unwavering, it stole her breath. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, squeezing them gently. "You look beautiful," he murmured. She smiled through the tears threatening to spill. "You look pretty good yourself." The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and promises, of love that had been tested and had only grown stronger. And when Tristan kissed her, sealing their forever, Oaklynn knew. This was exactly where she was meant to be. With him. Always.